to travel to other worlds. Until recently, this seemed to be an impossibility. But great new discoveries have brought us to the threshold of a new frontier, the frontier of interplanetary space.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Planet Ping Pong podcast, the podcast that's all about table tennis news, reviews, discussions, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to talk too much because this is a bit of a special episode. I was actually able to interview a very important figure in table tennis. This is Matt Hetherington. If you follow the table tennis scene at all, you probably know him already. But really nice guy. I'm really thankful that he came on the show and gave us this interview. And of course, you will notice a bit of a difference in the quality of the sound, especially on my end, but that's because I'm kind of limited to doing these interviews just through Zoom at the moment. And so, because I had to record this Zoom meeting with Matt, you will notice a bit of a difference in the quality of the sound, but you should still be able to hear both of us just fine. And with that, I'll just get started with the interview. All right, so I am joined by EULA USA and World Representative of Table Tennis, my good friend and Call of Duty expert, Matt Hetherington. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm pretty good. Not too bad. Things are kind of starting to go in the right direction in New Jersey, which is good compared to the rest of the US. So, we've been able to reopen our club and things are picking up.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of ask about that because, a lot of sports, not just table tennis, but a lot of sports in general have been just kind of put on hold. And gyms are closing, tournaments have been canceled, all that kind of crap. And so I was just gonna ask you just from the beginning, how have you been holding up with this whole Corona issue?
Well, it was quite a, I guess they use the expression, a spanner in the works. Because it really fell at the worst time possible for me because I basically just left USA Table Tennis and moved back to New Jersey and was supposed to be starting something else, and then that all fell to bits. So that was like the first problem that I ran into. And then, of course, I was at home by myself for like 3 months, I guess.
Yeah.
So the people that I live with that own the club, they went to Florida and I decided not to go with them. So I was stuck by myself, turning into, I guess, like Ben Kenobi from from Star Wars. I was like a hermit, just, I didn't really do that much in the beginning.
Well, you have the facial hair to pull off a Ben Kenobi.
Yeah, but mine's orange.
You've got the same.
Honestly, if I'd left it during the whole quarantine, it would be ridiculous. Because this is like 1 week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I have some of those Asian genetics, so it doesn't really grow on me that quickly.
This is all Scandinavian. So when my facial hair grows out, it's orange, which is not necessarily a great thing. But yeah, it was an interesting time. I actually felt like once I got a handle on it, it was quite productive. So once I started working out and I got into a good routine of like cooking food every day, because I'm trying to eat plant-based, which is getting easier, I guess. But I had a lot of time to practice like cooking different plant-based dishes, and I had a good workout routine. And then I started making these coaching tutorial videos. So I felt after the first 2 weeks, it was pretty difficult not having other people around. But at the same time, in hindsight, it was probably quite a good period of time for me. I felt quite healthy when I came back out of the house.
Yeah. And that's kind of the question I wanted to start with, is that you are kind of this more plant-based table tennis athlete. And so I was going to ask, how has that change in diet really kind of affected a few things, like your play style, the way you strategize your training? Just tell me about how that new plant-based diet is affecting your training.
Well, I was eating basically all meat for I mean, my whole life. I was basically carnivorous. Like I ate meat more than anything else. And obviously people had told me, because I have autoimmune conditions, and people said, you know, eating plant-based is a good thing to try. And I never, ever even considered it. You know, when you eat like 90% meat, it's pretty hard to think about going vegan and not being able to eat meat anymore. But it's been going really well. I eat smaller meals, which has been good. One of the big differences between before and now is that I don't really get like the same amount of like bloating. You know, like if you eat a lot of food, sometimes you have to sit for like an hour and a half or lie down or take a nap. I don't really have that anymore. So, you know, like I can eat four. I could probably eat four Beyond Burgers and then go running like 15 minutes later. So that was good. I definitely feel like I have more energy. I lost a reasonable amount of weight between, you know, being on a new diet and working out. So in terms of how it's affected me playing, I move a lot more than I did before. And so, you know, when you're coaching a lot, you get into habits of playing with your hands a lot. So you're doing a lot of kind of touchy stuff, and you lose that physical aspect of playing, which is really the intense part of playing table tennis. And if you're not physically capable, then you can't be very aggressive. And so I feel like since I came back, I've been playing a little bit more aggressive, definitely playing more forehand now, as I'm actually moving my ass and stepping around the corner, and getting out to the wide balls. So yeah, I feel like it's helped. It's definitely something I'm going to carry on with, which is really I spent a while thinking about it. I started off doing Monday to Friday, and then on weekends I would eat meat. And then now it's like I throw in a cheat meal every now and then, you know, Popeyes. Can't get away from that.
Dude, Popeyes, I live for Popeyes. We finally opened a Popeyes here in my city because I live in a pretty small town here in Canada. But dude, Popeyes is
Are you like a spicy chicken sandwich person, or?
hell yeah, dude. Like
That's the best. Yeah, that's the kingpin. That's what I order. I probably had it maybe. I have to be kind of disciplined with myself, but I probably had it like 4 times during 3 months.
yeah, well,
Just every now and then, I'm like, you know, I shouldn't be doing this, but
yeah.
I'm not. That's why I try to. The difficult thing about doing plant-based is that I don't. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I see that you're vegan." I'm like, "Well, no, I'm not vegan." Because as soon as you tell people you're vegan, if they see that you're eating something that's like, look, if I eat these are not vegan. These are like cookies that have milk chocolate in them. So, you know, if somebody sees you eating them, they're like, oh, shame on you, you know, you're not vegan. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not vegan. I'm trying, but so yeah, I've tried to kind of, it's hard to find terminology. I just tell people I'm trying to eat more plant-based.
Yeah.
Without saying like, yeah, I don't want to put a title on it.
No, I completely get it. And so, well, it's good to hear that the plant-based diet is working out pretty well. And I imagine that, like you talked about how it helps you move a lot more. I imagine that really is beneficial because I assume that when you start coaching more and more, you start becoming more like static when you're actually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, definitely.
good to hear that it's helping you with your movement. And
It's more, it's hard to explain. It's not necessarily, I mean, I could move before. I wouldn't say it's like directly the diet. It's just the fact that I have more energy, and the diet giving me more energy helps me work out more. So like, you know, if I'm stuffing my face with like, if I'm eating like steak and lobster and just filling up with food, I'm spending a lot of time recovering from eating, and then it's impossible to work out after that. Like all you want to do is just go and sleep. As soon as you put your head on a pillow, you're like out for 4 hours. Whereas now it's like, now that I don't have those phases of being sleepy or lethargic, I have more time that I can actually, where I actually feel like working out. And so indirectly, that helps with me actually playing better table tennis. So a lot of it's mental. I don't even know if it's a physical thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well that makes a lot more sense when you put it that way. But the next thing that I want to talk about is that you said that you're in New Jersey, right?
Mm.
But we've talked about it a little bit before, just you and me. But I just kind of want to talk about your journey starting from your place of birth and how you got over to the American table tennis scene.
Well, not so. Even people that are really close to me don't know this, but I wasn't born in New Zealand. I was born in the UK, and my parents decided to move when I was 5. So I hadn't started playing table tennis yet. I think my grandmother had like this tiny little, one of those tables that can be more than one game.
Oh,
It can be
yeah,
like a table tennis table or a billiards table.
like those ones
Um,
you like flip over.
yeah, but it was tiny. I mean, like we were 4. So I remember playing on that. That was like my first memory of table tennis. But yeah, my parents decided to move and they were choosing. This is funny because I could have ended up in one of 3 places. They were choosing between New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. So Canada it could have been on the cards.
Yeah, you could have been my neighbor.
I could have been, yeah. So yeah, my parents decided to move to New Zealand. So I was 5, and my entire extended family are in the UK. So we're like the splinter group. So it was just my parents and me and my sister. We moved. Um, my dad actually applied for a job in Hawaii on the way. So we were in Hawaii for like 2 weeks on the way to New Zealand, but he didn't get that. So luckily, I ended up in New Zealand instead. Not that there's anything wrong with Hawaii, but I feel like I would have been dealing with a lot of sunburn because I'm pretty white. But yeah, I was in New Zealand from the age of 5 to I guess 23. And then obviously I was playing a lot of table tennis and started coaching quite young. But it was kind of by chance that I came to the US. I was coaching two table tennis players. I was playing a lot with one of the table tennis players and coaching him a little bit. And he won the New Zealand Hopes, which is like the 11-12 ITTF Hopes event. And then he won the Oceania event in Australia. And then they asked me to take him to Austria. So I went to the Schlager Academy for the World Hopes trial, which back then there were 60 players. There were 30 boys and 30 girls. So there was 1 boy and 1 girl from New Zealand. So I went with them. And then he played really well. So he beat the kid from Singapore. There was 1 kid from Egypt that they were like saying, yeah, he's really good. He's really good. So he managed to beat him in the quarterfinals. And then eventually he lost in the semifinal to Truls Morgard from Sweden, who was like child prodigy back then and kind of still is. But yeah, so he made the World Hopes team, which is, they choose the best, I guess, I think there were 4 or 5 players.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a bit of continental split as well. So they'll try and get a player from Asia, a player from Europe, a player from North America, and if they can, a player from Oceania.
Yeah.
So yeah, it turned out that they usually have a training camp. And for the first time, the training camp was in North America, and it was at Lily's club. I hadn't met Lily before, but my training partner from New Zealand was dating her son. So my training partner is now married to Adam Hugh, which is Lily's son. So there's a kind of weird connection there. But yeah, basically I came here and it was good. And they were having summer camp here at the same time. I played some matches with some of their coaches, and I ended up coming back here a couple of times to practice because I felt it was a nice environment. It's not too foreign to go from New Zealand to the United States because it's still a Western environment.
Mm-hmm.
But the training was definitely better than it was for me back home. Yeah, and then eventually they asked if I wanted to stay longer and coach. So I went through that whole cycle of trying to get my green card and filling out all that paperwork and dealing with attorneys and stuff, and ended up getting my green card. I guess I got it in 2016, but I applied. It was like the start of 2015. So I basically lived now in New Jersey since the start of 2015.
Oh, okay.
Apart from last year, I was in Colorado.
And that kind of ties into another thing that I wanted to say, or ask, I should say, that because you've spent so much time and so you've trained, you've coached in so many different environments, I was going to
Mm.
ask, are there any kind of regional differences that you've noted depending on the place that you're at, as far as strategy, game plan, or just basic training methods that change in between the areas?
Yes. I would say Asia is much more focused on technique,
Hmm.
and not just stroke technique, but footwork technique as well. And also more focused on the repetitive aspect of training. So, like when I was in China, the first time that I went to China was 2015. So I was a little bit late to that show. But I went to China. I was there for a month. And the first place that I went was Jiangding, which is it used to be the Olympic training center for the Chinese national team. And they kind of opened it up. It was like a gateway training center for foreign players to go and visit China and experience Chinese training. So the first time that I went there, we took 3 coaches from my club and 7 of the kids that we were teaching. We took them to China. And there were players there from Norway, Sweden, the Congo, I think, maybe Oman. There was quite a mixed bag of players there, and like Andrew Bagley was there from England. And there were a couple of other players. I think Wang Yang was there, the chopper from Slovakia.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was really good, and we were doing 2.5 hours in the morning after the warm up, and then you warm up again, and then another 2.5 hours in the afternoon. So you're doing 6-hour days plus gym time afterwards, and each half of the day is multi-ball.
Really?
Yeah, so every single day you get there, you're split into 2 groups, and then they will tell you whether your half is doing table drills or multi-ball. So you never know till you get there. So you have to wake up in the morning prepared to do 2.5 hours of multi-ball, which is not fun, especially in the beginning. It was like horrific experience for me. It was in the summer, and it was probably, I'm going to say like 35 degrees Celsius inside the training hall, and it's not really air conditioned that well. So it was really tough, and you're sweating bucket loads to try and get through these boxes of multi-ball. The first 3 or 4 days, big struggle. Like you just have burning in your lungs trying
Yeah.
to get through these boxes. But I was trying to set a goal of finishing the whole box. So no matter what multi-ball drill I was doing, I was like, I have to finish the whole box. So, eventually you get used to it. But to cut a very long story short, I think multi-ball and really breaking down technical stuff, footwork and technical strokes is a big thing in Asia, and they use a lot of multi-ball to do it. When I went to Europe, the training days were shorter. So I probably trained about 4 hours a day.
Hmm.
They played a lot more matches. When I was in China, when we played matches, I basically killed like more than half of the players that I played against, because they just don't, they're training partners and they just don't have any match experience. Whereas in Europe, they're playing all the time. So I was in the Czech Republic. I went to the Czech Republic before I played the Worlds in 2017. And I trained with Peter Corbell and his team there, which was really good. But yeah, they play a lot more matches. They do drills that are, I wouldn't say they're low intensity, but they seem to focus a lot more on building rhythm and building good ball feeling. They're not necessarily in uniform with their strokes. There's a lot of different styles, and they tend to focus more on the quality of the contact instead of the technique as a whole. So, you don't have to have a perfect technique. It's more about how you contact the ball. And if you understand how you're producing spin or what you need to do with your racket angles to accelerate or to hit third ball attack, then for the most part, there's not really too much concern with, changing techniques. I did learn some good stuff though. I mean, when you go and play with Corbell, I definitely improved my backhand and my backhand banana. Those were like the two things. So he was really helpful with that. But for the most part, I feel, Asia definitely more technically focused than Europe. And those are kind of the two main training areas that people care about. My experiences of training in the US and New Zealand are not really. There's nothing really specific then. Put it this way: if people are interested in training, I'm not going to recommend to them that they should go to New Zealand or the US. If you're really serious about table tennis, then these are like, you could come here. Depends on your level. But if you're high level and you want to train more, then Europe or Asia are the two go-tos.
And just kind of connecting those two together, those last two bits, because you have been in the US for quite a few years at this point, and again, you've been playing and teaching in the US, and have this big, rich experience of training elsewhere in the world. What do you think about, one, table tennis in the US, and two, how it's growing in the US?
I don't think it's growing competitively. And it's something that I always felt really strongly that it should be focused on more. I think, there's a lot of clubs, which is great. And there's a lot of tournaments, which is great. So there's a lot of, the infrastructure for people to play and compete is really good. You can go around the country and you can find clubs that have rubber floor, really good tables, nice lighting, and good air conditioning. And they're all over the country. In terms of the number of players that are actively competing, there's a lot of room for improvement. So when people say that table tennis is growing in the US, I feel like it's growing socially. But at the same time, it's always been a big part of, like people growing up. Most people have played table tennis, whether it's in their basement or their garage, or, most people have played. And so I don't know if it's necessarily growing in terms of the number of people playing it, but it's getting more exposure and it's getting included in more events. So they have maybe charity tournaments and exhibitions at like different sporting events. So you tend to see it a little bit more. And maybe there are some more celebrities that are playing table tennis that are getting good headlines. But in terms of actually growing the sport competitively, it's pretty steady. There's no like huge increase in numbers of people competing in table tennis.
Yeah. And so, because you kind of mentioned it right there, that it might get a lot more exposure nowadays, you've played with celebrities like Kevin Hart and who was the other guy you played?
Keegan-Michael Key.
Yes, yeah.
And then I was in LA with Kanak when he was with Nick Jonas as well. So I didn't play with him, but
do you think table tennis with the celebrities, do you think that would kind of help the growth of table tennis at all? Maybe in the competitive sense, or do you still think it's just kind of growing socially?
I think that's it's definitely more for social.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, maybe it makes people more aware of table tennis, and obviously anything you can connect with celebrities, people think it's cool. But at the same time, I don't think people watching a video of Kevin Hart trying to do multi-ball, which he wasn't really that great at, as much as he tried. And it was a lot of fun, but I don't think anybody is going to pick up a racket and say, okay, now that I've watched that, I've just become inspired to become a professional table tennis player. Maybe they might want to go down to a club and like play around a little bit. But the difficult thing is finding a conduit to take people out of social table tennis and try and get them to compete. And I think even though there are clubs all across the US that all have these great tournaments, I don't think the average man is really going to go to a club and say, I'm ready to play a tournament, because there's a gap between somebody who's been playing socially and somebody who's played tournaments or who's played in a club before. And so I think people would find it quite intimidating. And so really you need a network of tournaments that are in the middle ground. You need more recreational tournaments. And I think that's kind of the gap that needs to be filled, is having recreational tournaments. And then maybe, you know, when you have a recreational tournament, you can kind of look at the winners of those tournaments and then try and maybe get them towards going to clubs. So like, I mean, even in Lily's club here in New Jersey, we have high school field trips or middle school field trips where we get sometimes 30 or sometimes 100 students that come to the club and they play table tennis. And then we organize a tournament for them. And sometimes when you get to the end, maybe like the last 4 or the finalists, like the last 2 players, you kind of look at them and you're like, you know, they can actually hit a ball. And so then if you can find a way to get those small handful of players out of those social tournaments and say, hey, you're actually not too bad, and maybe you could like come and play in a club league or play in a recreational tournament, then maybe that is like the connection between actually getting more people to compete.
On the more competitive side of things, again, because you've trained and you've practiced in so many places and you've met so many people, just kind of, I want to know, what are some of the more notable, maybe more impressive, or some just funny stories in general about some players you've played with before? Because there's videos of you playing with Table Tennis Daily's Dan, and just...
Oh, God. No.
Do you have any notable players that you've played against? It just kind of the story behind that.
Okay, well, I'm not talking about, I'm not going to talk about my match with Dan, because
okay, I'm sorry.
that's like, I'm still waiting for my rematch and he knows it. That was like the most horrific scenario ever.
You can make a call out right now.
I already have. I have. I've made the call out to him. I did it in my, when I interviewed him on Instagram Live. So he knows that there's a rematch at hand. Basically, when I played that match with Dan, I was working at the World Veteran Champs, which is a huge event. We're talking like 4,000 players. And I was doing all the media coverage for the event. I had a couple of people helping me, but it was insane. So it was like very early starts and incredibly late nights. You know, we're like 20 hours awake each day. And I played Dan, I think after 9 days, and it was a little bit too casual. I thought I could beat him more easily than I was a little bit complacent, and so he got the better of me. But I told him that next time it's going to be serious. So anyway, that's Dan. Let's see. I played Osang. I played him in the doubles event. He came to New Zealand. I played New Zealand Open, and he snaked me from under the table. And that was probably one distinct memory I have, because I was 99% sure that the ball would kick to my left. And after I started moving and the ball hit the table, I knew it was going to kick to the right. And so I jumped as far to my right side as I possibly could. And the ball kicked so fast that it just hit me in the stomach. So that was like that was one of my wow moments of like, that was 2013. So I hadn't even left New Zealand yet.
Yeah.
So I was still quite, domesticated. But that was quite eye-opening. I was like, man, this guy's insane. Like, how can you do that? Yeah, I think the most random one was when I went to China. I played the China Open 5 years ago, and there were not many Western players there. The level of the China Open was crazy. You have all of the top players in Asia and a lot of players from China. And so the Europeans didn't really want to go. They were like, if we're going to pick a big tournament to go to, maybe we'll go to Japan or Korea, but we don't want to go to China because it was just too hard. So when I played the China Open, there were very few. It was like Timo Boll, Samsonov, Ovcharov, Freitas. I think Robert Gardosh was there, Lundqvist, and then a few other players. It was like Hashard, Alex Chen, and Benjamin Brossier, I think. But there was like less than 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent like the whole week with these guys, which was like the first real connection that I got to have with, even though I'd interviewed them before, because I was interviewing people like crazy for my blog. That was like the first time I got to really spend a lot of time with mainly Samsonov and Timo. So, yeah, I got to play with Timo just a little bit. Basically, Samsonov put his racket down on the table and went to check on a match. And I was sitting there with them. I'd already been knocked out, obviously, because it was like the shortest tournament I've ever played in my entire life. I played one match, lost 4-0, and then I was done. But yeah, Vladdy put his racket down and then went to check on Ovcharov's match result. And so then Timo was like, here, you can come and block for me instead. And I was like, well, I don't have my racket. And so he let me use one of his, which was crazy. I was like, man, this feels so good. But yeah, I was blocking for Timo. But it was like, there have been a few moments like that. And honestly, the ones that stand out for me, I feel like Timo has kind of been involved in all of them. He's just such a genuinely humble and surprising human being. Like, you know, everybody wants to talk to him. Everybody wants to hang out with him. All of the fans love him. We went to before I was sponsored by Yola, I went to the butterfly party, which is like World Championships. They have a butterfly party. And I was working for USATT. And so my boss was like, make sure you get pictures of the team and blah, blah, blah. And so Timo came up to me to say hello, which is like the first great thing about him. Because like, I don't expect him to walk up to me and say hi. It should be the other way around. And then my boss was like, okay, we're getting a team picture now. Like, while Timo's trying to talk to me, I'm like, shit, you know, like, why now? You know, like, I'm talking to Timo. This is like, I don't want the guy to walk off. But I was organizing this team photo with all the US players, and he just stood there and waited like the whole time. And I was like, man, that's really cool. Like, he's probably one of the few players. He could have just walked off. There's like plenty of other people he could go and talk to. But he just stood there, and I probably took like 5 or 6 different photos, and people had to rearrange themselves and add people in and take people out. And he just stood on the side the whole time and then just waited for me to finish. So I have a very good impression of that man. He's everything that people say about Timo Boll and how great a sportsman he is and how humble he is and how nice he is, it's all true.
Yeah, it looks like it. Like in any interview that I've seen, every time I've seen him on, you know, Ask the Pro or something like that, and he's just kind of casual-ish interview segment, he always looks like a really humble, really chill dude.
Yeah, he really is. Yeah, I haven't seen him in person for a while. I know when I played the Worlds in Malaysia, I was going to catch up with him, but he got sick and then he had to leave. And then the German team lost. Mm-hmm. And then the next year he got sick again, Dusseldorf, which was like his big year because he had a really good draw. He was on the bottom half and Shushin got knocked out. But he got sick again. So I didn't really see him there either. So yeah, I don't get to see him that often. But when I do, it's worth it. You know, it's worth the wait. He's a great guy.
Totally. And so you talked a little bit about that experience you had over in China with the China Open and how high level that tournament is. That kind of brings me over to the topic that I want to talk about next. And that's just China has been so dominant in table tennis since really the Olympics. Since the first table tennis match in the Olympics, China has just been at the top. And so I wanted to ask you, as a coach, this is just more of your personal perspective as a coach.
Hmm.
What do you think is needed to kind of go and perhaps surpass that level of Chinese dominance in table tennis?
Well, first of all, I don't think it can be done. Probably, you know, like that's funny because when people ask this question, somebody's always like, "Oh, we need this and we need this." Well, I would say for at least the next 20 years, China definitely has everything that they need to stay at the top. I'm trying to think of. Yeah, last year I was in close training with the Chinese team for 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
which for a foreign media person, because I was there working for media, is unheard of. In closed training, they don't let anybody come inside. Like went all the way to China, and even the Guangdong province team had closed training, and they wouldn't let me in. They were like, "No way, foreign guy, get out." I went to Beijing, and the national team were there, and I was not allowed to stay in the closest hotel to the training center because the national team were training there. So I lugged all my bags all the way to this hotel, and they were like, "Nope." They were like, "Chinese national team staying here." I said, "Yeah, but I'm a table tennis player." They were like, "Yes, you are a table tennis player. You're a foreign table tennis player. You can't stay here." So to be in that environment of being in their closed training for 3 weeks was first very stressful, because being a media person around the Chinese team is unbelievably difficult. There are so many like hurdles and obstacles you have to get through. There are things you can film, there are things you can't film. There are times that you can film, there are times that you can't film. But getting to the main point, this is a team that is like, they have everything. They're training now. They have been training this entire time. The rest of the world is shut down. They have not stopped training. So they were in the Aspire Academy in Qatar, and now they're in Macau, and they're in closed training. So they're isolated from everybody else anyway. But they just train. They train nonstop. They train for every scenario. They train for every player that they find threatening. They have people that are strategizing for them. They have people collecting statistics for them. They have physical therapists. They have very, very good physical trainers that are from Poland, and also one of them's from Serbia. So I had the pleasure of meeting those guys, and their physical therapists as well. So they're very well looked after, but they are real athletes. This is like the huge difference between, say, China and the US. The US players, yes, they supplement their training with some physical training. The Chinese players are serious athletes. They are built like they could switch sports and do something else. You know, like if they wanted to be like a pole vaulter or a high jumper or a long jumper, they have trained to be athletes. And I wrote one blog, which some people kind of felt was a bit of a strange topic, but it was about the difference between what I consider to be table tennis players and table tennis athletes. And a lot of people are like, well, they're the same. The Chinese players are really like their muscle tone and their muscle definition, their physical fitness. I mean, you've seen Xu Shen like running around the court. It's insane.
Oh, yeah.
There are no players that can mimic that, really. Maybe apart from like Chuang Chi-yuan, but he's old now. Like he hasn't retired yet, but he's closer towards retirement age. And so I think they just have everything they need. The fact that it's their national sport is like a huge boost for them. The fact that they are socialists and that the government pays and supports them to be table tennis players is probably what I would consider to be the biggest difference. And a lot of people don't really think about that. It's the fact that they can play table tennis, and if they make it to national team, they make a lot of money. If they don't make it to national team, they can become coaches. They can become their province team players. They're playing in the Super League. There's a lot of different pathways that they can take. And the government will still pay and still support them to be a part of that bigger system. So there's no other country in the world that has a system like that. And building a system like that is I mean, to try and imagine it. If you were running the Canadian Table Tennis Association and they said to you, okay, we want you to write a plan and your job is to mimic the Chinese national training program. And then it's like, you have to find the venues, you have to bring the players together from across the country, but also it's the process of going into like preschools and looking for kids with like coordination, exceptional coordination, or doing these little tests, taking them out of school, putting them into like school land training together. All this whole massive system just picks players from a very, very young age. And then, it doesn't really happen like that anywhere else in the world. And so I think honestly, the thing that will make a big difference is if China loses interest in table tennis.
Really?
I think if they get to a point where they say, look, we're the best in the world at this sport, which is great. We're patriots. We love winning. Everybody likes gold medals. We love being the best in the world at table tennis. But eventually, surely, there's going to be a point where people say, do we really want to keep watching table tennis all the time? Like if it's the same, if it never changes, it's always like, okay, Super League again, China Open, Super League, World Champs. We're winning, we still won, we won again. Then maybe some people lose interest in it. And I know at one point they had some spectator problems with the Super League and people were losing interest in the Super League. So they pulled in for like one season. They had like Ovtcharov, Timo Boll, Jorgen Persson, Ju Se-hyuk, Chang Chi-yuan. They brought in some players. I think even Ariel Sheng from the US that season she played. So they tried to get in some foreign players to make it a little bit more exciting and a little bit different. But at the end of the day, I think that's really, I think people in China have to lose interest or maybe become interested in another sport to take away from their table tennis.
Mm-hmm.
In order for really anyone to have a chance. I mean, maybe it's like Timo says, you can beat one of them, but nobody's going to beat the whole team. Like it's impossible. Yeah.
What about your thoughts on the Japanese prospects kind of coming up at the moment? Because on the internet, there's quite a lot of talk and a lot of discussion about how players like Mimaito, Harimoto, Hirano, and so on. There's a lot of discussion of how these young athletes from Japan can come up and perhaps beat the Chinese. What do you think about that?
I think they can, but again, you don't have the depth of having a whole team. Whether or not they can beat them in the biggest events hasn't really been done yet. I mean, Hirano managed to beat them for I think the Asian Championships in 2017. She beat 3 of them. The problem is, I mean, Japan has obviously a really good system for developing young players, and they always have. So if you look at even Fukuhara from the generation before,
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of young child prospects in table tennis, but there seemed to be a bridging gap. They could get them to 20th in the world, but then they weren't really able to progress them further than that point. And then there was Mitsutani broke through. They started to have some more breakthroughs at a kind of a later age. They weren't really getting through there at that young age like Harimoto has and like Mimaito has. So partially, I think the ball changing has helped them quite a lot because Harimoto's style is very well tailored towards the plastic ball. And I think Mimaito's style as well. They play very early in the bounce. There's a lot of countering. There's a lot of close table, backhand to backhand exchanges. They don't play off the table as much. And so I think that was a big advantage for them, was changing the ball. And a lot of the Chinese players that were there before the ball changed were going through a lot of adjustments, while the younger Japanese players kind of came in at the right time where they were able to be almost a clean slate, I guess, or they were able to adapt quicker. But yeah, they definitely have some good systems, I think. I haven't experienced them myself, but I've seen a lot of good Japanese players The problem is, can they make a whole team out of them? And also, it's more about when they win. And so, like, winning the Asian Championships is great, but as soon as she won that event, you put yourself big time on the radar for China. And they're going to watch every video of you that they can. They're going to send people to your matches, and they'll figure out every single intimate little detail or weakness in your game. And yeah, I mean, Hirano hasn't really been able to beat any of them, I guess, since then. So, maybe if one of them came out and just rolled straight into the Olympic Games and just took them all by surprise, then maybe it would work. But yeah, the hurdle for Japanese players beating China is I think they're very capable of beating these players the first time. So Harimoto has beaten pretty much every Chinese national team player, I think, but he's beaten them once. I don't know if he can beat them again. And he kind of had that shock value, which was like he came out and everyone was like, whoa, this kid's good. But now, like a little more recently, like if you look at the last year, he's struggled a lot more with players as they've gotten used to playing against him, or as they've seen other people beating him. So, he's got a style that people can learn against, and it's more a matter of whether they can adapt after they lose. So I don't know. There's definitely potential there. I mean, I'd be an idiot if I said that Harimoto had no chance. But at the same time, them being able to get to world number one it'd be pretty difficult. I mean, easier now than before, because they just have to play well in certain events. They don't have to actually beat the top players to get up there. But yeah, there's still a way to go.
I understand. And so with that, we're starting to get towards the end of our time here. So just kind of want to do some kind of two short, kind of more fun questions, just so that the viewers and listeners at home can learn a little bit more about you.
Oh, God.
Just,
all right, fair enough.
It's not going to be your credit card information. Don't worry.
That would be of so little use to you right now. Really. But there's a really common misconception with people, especially on Instagram, that people who are verified must be rich. It's not. I'm just throwing this out there. It ain't true. It's not.
Anyway, with that, just a quick question. Aside from table tennis, because we've talked about table tennis for this entire time, right? So aside from that, what are some of your basic interests? Are you into any other sports that just not related to table tennis?
Oh, this is kind of sad. Honestly, I am kind of immersed in this sport. So, I'm doing all my stuff on social media. Sometimes I'm doing reviews. Sometimes I'm doing media stuff. Sometimes I'm coaching. Sometimes I'm training. Sometimes I'm organizing stuff. So I have my thumb in a lot of pies when it comes to table tennis. So it does consume the majority of my time. Are there other things that I like doing? Sure. I don't get to do them very often, but I do like going bowling. I like watching bowling too.
Really?
I remember watching, I think it was the USA versus Europe. They have like a bowling cup, and I watched a guy bowl 14 strikes in a row. And I was like, damn, that's so cool. Like, I wish I could do that. So I like games. I like games that are kind of similar to table tennis. So like, I don't know whether you call them like parlor games. That's what they used to call table tennis, like back in the 1900s. But like bowling and even like darts.
Oh, okay.
They're fun for me. This is stuff that you don't get to see very often. Ironically enough, I'm not really into the big sports. So like, I don't really watch basketball that much. I can if I really want to, but I definitely don't watch baseball. I don't watch hockey. Golf drives me nuts. Like I can't. I don't know how it gets so much TV coverage time. I just find it incredibly difficult to understand how people can sit and watch other people playing golf for like hours. I do like going to a driving range, and I don't mind playing like mini golf, but all the stuff in between is like, I mean, I suck at it. So the stuff in between. The golf driving, I'm fine. Not too bad. But yeah, there are some sports. In terms of watching sports, I would say probably tennis has been the one that I've watched more. It's probably the only sport that I've really taken an interest in watching. But even that, I don't really watch that much anymore.
And so, last question, and this is a question I have been wondering and thinking about since the beginning, since I first saw you. You have a huge collection of comic book related snapbacks.
Yeah, I do.
Story behind the hats. I need to know.
Honestly, I never really wore hats that much. I had one hat. It was like this kind of black wool. It was like a woolen, like knitted hat with a brim on it. And I used to I started wearing it all the time. And I don't know why. And obviously, like, this is back when my hair was like still growing out. Like, that's gone now, which is a more compelling reason to wear hats. But I started wearing that, but I was never interested in wearing caps or like baseball hats or snapbacks or anything. But after I moved to the US, there was a company called Chop and Loop, and it was like this tiny little startup, and it was a guy who was like really into the idea of making streetwear, table tennis themed streetwear. And so he was like, man, I'll send you some stuff. Like, we'll sponsor you. And so he sent me some stuff, and he sent me 2 snapbacks. And in the beginning, I was like, I don't wear snapbacks. Like, I'm not going to wear these. I ended up wearing them all the time. And I wore them until they were like smushed out of shape and like gross from like sweating in them and stuff. But yeah, it's become a thing now. I mean, people buy me hats. So like if people were like stuck for like what to buy me as a gift, they buy me hats, especially my sister. My sister bought me this one. But the real like momentum that I built up was last year. I moved to Denver. So I was living in Colorado, and I got an apartment that was I would say it was like maybe like 2 minutes drive from a Dave & Buster's, which for everyone who doesn't know is an arcade gaming place, and they're relatively big. So I was going there like a reasonable amount, trying to collect Marvel Contest of Champions cards or whatever the hell they're called. And I was racking up all of these points from going to Dave & Buster's. And I think the first time that start of last year, when I went on a training camp, I took the kids to Dave & Buster's, and we all got enough points, and we decided to get these Pac-Man hats. So they were Pac-Man snapbacks. And so we have this picture of like 4 of us. We all got these snapbacks. And then I was like, man, this could be a really good way for me to get more of these hats. Because, you know, if I'm like out in the sun and I'm sweating in them, or like maybe if I'm just screwing around playing table tennis and sweating them, then they get ruined. Like eventually you can't keep the same hat forever. So basically Dave & Buster's became the conduit for me to acquire all these new hats. I was just getting so many points, and they're all like Marvel themed or, you know, stuff like that. I have like Batman ones, which is DC, which I'm not a huge fan of so much, but I'm a big Marvel junkie. I've got Deadpool, Black Panther. I have a couple of Star Wars ones, which is cool. Also, I got the Yola one, which is the only one in existence. I got Yola to make me my own snapback, and I've been trying to convince them. They have to make me a new one now because they have new logos. I've been trying to convince them to basically start producing snapbacks, and then have their logo on it, but also have something that's kind of signatory to me. Yeah. So that everyone who wears one of the snapbacks, I'll be like, yeah, you're wearing my hat. So that's my end game with Yola. I'm still working on that, but I think that would be really cool. I think a lot of people would wear snapbacks. I think, and it's good to have table tennis stuff off the table as well as on. And so that's my goal, is to get them to start making snapbacks, and then I'd be able to get more as well, which is a bonus. But yeah, we talked about it a little. It's a no-brainer for them. It was like when I started my sponsorship with them, I was like, I'm basically a walking billboard. Like, I have the surface area of a snapback is quite big. Like, you can, and it draws people attention, right? Like, if I'm talking to someone and I have, like, right now I have a Deadpool on, right?
Yeah.
Like, you notice it, right?
Oh yeah, dude. Like, since the beginning, when I would watch like your interviews or whatever, or sometimes your coaching videos or whatever, I'd always be like, oh dude, that's
I'm wearing a different hat.
Yola, if you're listening, if one of the Yola marketing members is watching,
Oh, they'll watch this 100%. And when you guys do watch this, you owe me a new snapback with the new logo on, and I'm still waiting for it. Yeah, no, I talk with them a lot, and honestly, they're very brand savvy people, and I think that's been like one of their big successes compared to other brands, especially in the US, is that they're very savvy about branding.
Mhm.
I don't know about some of the naming of their recent products. I think they have a Game of Thrones fan in the mix, but yeah, hopefully that is my end game. Hopefully I can get, I'm not going to get my own blade. That's kind of everyone's big goal. Like, all the professional players, they're like, yeah, got my own blade with my name on. I don't think that's going to happen for me unless they come up with some kind of recreational line. So for me, it's going to have to be customized snapbacks.
You know what? I would buy one. I would totally buy a Matt Hetherington snapback, dude.
Yeah.
Help, dude.
Maybe I can like sign them on the side or something. I can do like a printed autograph.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
That would be totally sick. Anyway, with that, thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking your time.
No problem. It was fun. I love talking about table tennis. So doing this kind of stuff it's kind of a breath of fresh air. And the funny thing is, this is what I tell people when I do these interviews. I'm so used to being the person asking the questions, and I don't often get to be asked questions. So when I do, it's kind of an outlet where it's like, I might not get the chance to do this for like another year. So I just spout like endlessly. I have too much to say.
But I hope you can come back some other time. It would be great to have you on again.
Oh, anytime, dude.
Yeah, and we need to play another game of Call of Duty again, dude.
I know. I haven't played for like probably 2 months almost. It's been quite a long time. I got too frustrated with it because I'm not that good at Call of Duty. The funny thing is, like, I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, and so I played Battlefront 2, which is one of my favorite games. And honestly, it's very similar in concept to Call of Duty.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, like grenades, guns, all that kind of stuff. But I'm so much better at that. And I feel like it's just, I always tend to be better at Star Wars related games, even if they're the same. But then the same time, it's like people who play Call of Duty are like crazy people. Like they're like mad gamers. The difference between that and Star Wars fans play Battlefront. They're not like diehard fans for first-person shooters or third-person shooters or whatever. Call of Duty is different. It's a different kettle of fish. So, you spawn, you get shot. You spawn, you get shot. Eventually, it's, And when I'm going on there and playing with like Sam Walker and Liam Pitchford, there's some responsibility, and they're British, and I get the British sense of humor, but eventually it's if you end up in the gulag too many times, there are only so many jokes about being crap that you can take. Where I was just like, I'm just gonna play something else. Like, but yeah, I did have quite a long break, so I wasn't playing. I probably like 2 months. I didn't touch my PS4 at all. And then I got back into I started playing Final Fantasy VII Remake on hard mode.
Oh,
which
sure.
has been, like, it's insanely difficult. And I'm up to the last chapter of it now, and it's so hard to get through that last chapter. So I've kind of come back to it a little bit, but not to Call of Duty yet. But I'll make an effort at some point. We'll play. As long as you have my back, because you know I'm going to die and go straight to the gulag. That's
I'm
just
not the best either, but I'll give it a shot. And I guess just before we leave, do you want to plug anything, like maybe your Instagram or your website, your blog, anything like that?
Well, since you asked, if I was going to plug anything, I mean, my Instagram, the good thing for me is that all of my handles are the same, so I can just plug my handle, which is MHTableTennis. My Instagram floats quite nicely, but my YouTube channel at the moment is one thing that I'm bouncing back and forth on, because I did so many coaching tutorial videos during lockdown. But I feel like people weren't really watching. You know, like, since people weren't able to play, and this is like one of the conversations that I had with Dan Ives, and he was like, yeah, you know, it's hard to get people to watch tutorial videos because they're not at the table. And so it didn't really kick off like I thought it would.
Yeah.
I mean, I got good feedback from the people who did watch it, but now I'm just thinking, like, do I want to make more of them? Is it something I feel like investing my time in? I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, if I get a whole bunch of new subscribers from this, I might be compelled to make some new videos.
Cool. Well, I hope the YouTube channel goes well. And yeah, with that, you'll make some more snapbacks for Matt Hetherington.
Yeah, I'm going to have words with them after this, actually. You've reminded me, so I'm going to open up a dialogue.
Let them know that this guy helped you out with that.
Yeah, I will.
Anyway, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Cool, thanks, dude.